Hi, Chris of Trimble Forensics, and for this week's Trimble Forensics Tech Tip Tuesday, we're going to be covering point code libraries. How do you build and customize them to speed up your time on scene? Well, that's what we're going to be covering in the first part of this week's episode. So let's get to it. So when we're out at our scene and we're getting ready to start mapping with Trimble Forensics Capture, when we start our new scene, it gives us the option here to select the point code library for the set of codes that we want to use. And by default, you have Crash, CSI, Reveal, and None. So when we're working inside of our scene and we're ready to take our next shot with our optical total station or GNSS, if we want to change the code here and we want to change this to say bullet, it says the code does not exist. Please add a new code. If we wanted to add a new code, we would just add current. And in here, this is where we would add it to our current point code library. So we're using the CSI library. The code, we want it to be bullet. For the description, we can type that in. And if we want this to be permanently stored with the CSI library, we can add the code to the current library and click the blue check mark. And what that will do is that will add the bullet code to the CSI library permanently. So the next time we open up a scene in the CSI library, the code bullet will be available to us. And you can customize your code libraries as you go. However, there is an option in Reveal to be able to build your own code library on the desktop. So if you have a cold, wet, rainy night, or you have some downtime that you want to customize your code library on the desktop, you can definitely do that. So let's jump over into Reveal and I'll show you how to build a code library. So we've opened up Reveal, and the first place we need to go is to our Measurements tab and our Point Code Libraries icon. And we need to give this one a name, so I'm going to just call this one TFTTT list and click Next. And it's going to ask us, do we want to use a curve marker? For this one, I'm not going to use a curve marker. I'm going to click Next. And if we want to start with commonly used codes, we can start with a pre-populated list of commonly used codes. However, for this demonstration, we're going to leave this empty. We're going to click Next. And this is where we can begin adding our codes. From here, if I want to add a RP, and I'll call it reference point, and I'm not going to have a generated feature. We'll cover that a little bit later in the video. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to add a CP. Common or control point. Again, no generated feature. Click OK. And you just go down through and add codes that you like. Next, I'm going to add the backsite code. And then I'll add backsite check. And again, you just walk down through and you enter in the codes that you want. And later on in the video, I'll cover the feature type. So I'm going to go ahead and type in some other feature codes that we're going to be using for this example. And now that I've got just a real quick list of codes that I'm going to use for this example, again, you can use a pre-populated list to customize to your liking, or you can start from scratch and code your own. So at this point, I'm happy with the amount of codes I've got, so I'm going to click Next. Now, since this is going to be used in Capture, Capture does recognize special codes. So for this, for our reference point, we want this to recognize, or we want Capture to recognize RP as a reference point. We want it to recognize CP as a common or control point. I didn't enter a code for control point check, which would be a good one to have, but I don't have that, so I'm going to click None for my backsite. Use my backsite code, and for backsite check would be BSC. Now, if I was going to use this for GNSS as well, I would enter the information here. So I have my reference point, my common or control point check. I didn't create one. And for my base, if I was using a base and I wanted that to be a special code for capture, I would need to add that code in here, but since I didn't, I'm going to click None. And I click on Next. And you've completed the wizard. So now, when we click on our Measurements tab, Point Code Libraries again, now it gives us the option to pick an existing library. So next thing we would do is if we wanted to create a new library, we could create one. If we wanted to edit our library, we could edit that. If we wanted to remove the library from the list of code libraries in Reveal, we could do that. Or if we wanted to export a library, we could do that. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to export this library and we're going to take it back into Capture. So from here, I'm going to click Next. It's going to ask me which one do I want to export. I click Next. And then it's going to ask me where I want to export it. So I'm going to export this to a flash drive. And then once I have my file on the flash drive, I'm going to eject it from my computer and take it over to my data collector that's running Trimble Forensics Capture.
Now that I've copied the point code library PDL file onto my flash drive, it's time to import it into Capture. For the TDC 100 and TDC 600 Android-based data collectors, you can connect your device to your computer and copy it across, Bluetooth file transfer, or just email it. I'm using a TSC 7, but the process is going to be the same on the T10 and T7 devices. If you're using Capture, the process is going to be all the same. All I do for the TSC 7 is to insert my flash drive into the device and open up Capture.
So we've moved back over to our data collector that is running Trimble Forensics Capture, and now it's time to import the point code library that we just exported from Reveal. So in the upper left, there's a 3-bar menu here. If we just tap on that, and there's an option about midway down called Import Code Library. And when we click on that, this is where we would go to open up our flash drive if you did want to export it as a flash drive, or you could email it to the data collector or transfer it by Bluetooth, or however you wanted to transfer this .pdl file over. So here's our tfttt list.pdl that we just exported from Reveal. I just put it onto a flash drive and transferred it over to my TSC 7. From here, I'm going to open it up. And with that, my point code library has been entered. So now when I start a new scene, we now have another option here, which is our tfttt list point code library. And now when I'm working at my scene, I've got a scene open here and I want to switch over to that code library. In my 3-bar menu, I'm going to change my code library. I'm going to switch over to the TTT list code library. And now when I enter in a new point code, if I want to code something, I now have my base, my backsite check, C1234, CLF, deck, floor, evidence, and then I also have the codes that were unique to this job. So that's how you build the point code library in Reveal and then export it for use in Capture. Now let's take this one step further in bringing a scene in to Reveal and then using the point code library to automatically draw features for us. So we're back over at our desktop computer and we're in Reveal, and it's time to bring in our data that we just shot. So I'm going to go to my Measurements tab and I'm going to import a data log. That is a Trimble Forensics Capture. I'm going to go find my .capture file, and I've got it right here on my desktop. And from here, it's going to ask me what do I want to bring in. I'm just going to turn off a lot of these things just to make the import process a little bit easier. And if I used custom codes in my coding, so if I wanted to bring in the bullet code that I put in earlier, if I wanted to synchronize the new codes from Capture and bring those into Reveal for my code library in Reveal, I would just click on the feature codes tick box and that will import the feature codes in. Next, I can give it a name if I want. And from here is where we select which feature code library we want to use. So we could either not use a code library or we can use the tfttt list. Click Next. And since we used a point code library in Capture, if we wanted to import all of these things into a new library, we could name it CSI-2 if we wanted to. We could name it Officer Jones's list. If Officer Jones map this scene, you can have custom code libraries for each officer if you do want to do that, or you can have a code library for each unit or division, or if you had a special task such as CSI or body recovery or shooting, you could have code libraries custom built for the task at hand. For this example, I'm just going to click skip so I don't import other new things into my existing library. I click next, and I continue through the import process and click continue, and then my data log has been imported. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this up, and then we'll skip over to the auto generation of features. So I've finished drawing my scene, and I've got a four-way intersection here with the code CLF, so a chain link fence. I've got a fire hydrant here, and I believe over here I've got a manhole cover, and I've got 4 curbs. Now I can go through and I can manually draw in my curbs, put in a fire hydrant model, things like that. However, what I would like to do is I would like to automate this just a little bit. So what I've done is I've created a features layer, and I'm going to go to my code library. I'm going to click on my measurement log, and I'm going to tell it I want to use a point code library on this called tfttt list. Now, what I want to do is I want to customize my point code library. And I have my tfttt list code library, so I want to edit this library. And if you remember earlier in the video, I said that we would customize this library once we put in just the code and the description. There's the ability to put in a feature type. So for this, I'm going to start with my C1, which is my curb 1. So I'm going to click on curb 1, and I'm going to click change. And then there's this little option down here called generated features. So I'm going to click on the 3-bar menu or 3-button menu next to it. And this is where we can change that feature. So anytime it sees that code, it's going to draw in a certain feature. So for a curb, I'm going to make it draw a line. And click OK. I'm going to click the advanced arrow, and I'm going to change the appearance on this. So I'm going to give this a concrete texture. And I'm going to give this a 6-inch thickness. And a 6-inch extrusion. So it should make a 6x6 block. And if you normally shoot your scenes, if you run your prism or you're taking DR shots in the middle of your curb, you can have it thicken. So in this case, we're doing it 6 inches thick, so it would do 3 inches on one side, 3 inches on another. Or if you always shot the base of the curb, you can select either left or right, or if you shoot the top of the curb, it could be either left or right, depending on how you shoot the scene. For this one, I just shot the middle, so I'm going to thicken it from the center. And we should be good to go here. So we've got our concrete texture, and it's going to be 6 inches high by 6 inches wide, and click OK. Now you notice anytime we see C1, it'll generate a combo line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through here, and I'm going to do curbs 2, 3, and 4 the exact same way. Okay, so now I have my curbs 1, 2, 3, and 4 done. Next one down is I'm going to do the manhole cover. So for MHC, I'm going to hit change, and I'm going to have it generate a filled ellipse, just making it make a circle that is filled. And at this point, I'm going to choose the X and Y radius. So for a 3-foot manhole, we would have a 1.5 foot radius on the X, 1.5 on the Y. Now, if you wanted to generate an oval, you could change those values to be not the same. And for an extrusion, I'm going to give this a 0.01 feet, which should be approximately 1/8 of an inch extrusion, just enough to get it to stick through the surface, or make sure that it sticks through the surface every time. I click OK. Now for the next one, I want to generate a hydrant. So for my generated feature, I want it to generate a fire hydrant. Every time it sees the HYD code, I want it to be a hydrant. So I could either go to my objects and browse, or I could just search for it. And under landscape, there's a fire hydrant. Click OK. And I can set it so that it will change the properties of it away from defaults, but I like the default values, so I'm going to click OK. The next one I'm going to do is chain link fence. Now this one is a little bit different. My generated feature, I am going to have it generate a chain link fence. So under my drawing tools, I'm going to click on chain link fence and click OK. Now there is a couple options here that the points define post height. If you shoot your first point at the base of the fence and your second point on the top rail, that second point will change the height of the fence. rather than being a standard height every time. If at the scene you decide that you have a 5-foot fence one day and a 10-foot fence for the next scene, you could change it so anytime you're out at the scene, you shoot your first point at the base, second point at the top rail. It's going to adjust the height here in reveal for you. Also, if you shoot at every fence post, you can hit the points defined post spacing tick box to have it automatically generate a post at every point. Now here is where, for your height, if you didn't check the points defined post height, if you didn't check that, you can come down here to your height, and that way it'd set a standard height for that every time. I'm going to click OK, and this should be everything for this list. Now with your auto-generated list, or when you pre-populate a list, it's going to have a lot of this already in here, but if you're building it from scratch, this is where you can put in the features that you want Reveal to generate every time it sees that. And we're now finished editing our point code list. So now we have our scene here, and I could go through and I could draw all of these things manually, but that takes time. And I know when I go out and shoot my scenes, if I have 4 curbs, I've got C1, C2, C3, and C4, and I always code that the same every time. The same thing with my chain link fence. So here I shot the bottom of my fence and then the top rail, and then I used the prism pole to walk down through and got 4 more points along my chain link fence. For my manhole cover, I used the prism pole to shoot the center of the manhole cover, and that is where the manhole cover was, or at least the center of it. So what I did is I generate a layered called features, and when I click on my point code library to make it active, it's going to use the point code library TFTTT list that we just edited. In my Actions tab, there's a button down here at the bottom called Generate Features. And when I click on Generate Features, what Reveal is going to do is generate those features for me with one click of a button. And if you map your scenes the same way every time, this is going to be a huge time saver for you. Let's clear that out. So as you can see here, we've got a 4-inch wide by 4-inch high curb that runs along our intersection. We've got our manhole cover. Now with our manhole cover, we could have set it with a metal texture. Just didn't set at that time. But you see here, we have generated our fence. That the default was 8 feet high. However, this fence was 4.5 feet high. And because I changed the way that I shot my scene, now I can have it automatically generate the height of the fence for me. And we also have our hydrant. Now our hydrant, since the 000 point was down below, I'm going to have to adjust that down. And that will move my fire hydrant down to the point where it's at the curb.
As you can see, the use of point code libraries in Capture and Reveal have the ability to save a lot of time and effort in both the mapping of the scene and the diagramming. If you found this video to be useful, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and if you have any questions about this week's tips, be sure to put them in the comment section below. I'll see you all next week, and as always, stay safe out there.